Hey, everybody, welcome back to Christmas Culture Club. Today we are talking about surviving the holidays. And I'm Julie.
I'm Steve.
And today we have with us Jim Manzardo from the Grief Center or Center of Grief based out of Chicago. And he has been kind enough to share time with us to talk about some instances where, Christmas brings the Christmas season brings a lot of joy, but there are seasons in our lives where it may not be as joy filled. And we wanted to very much recognize that and talk through seriously about how you can handle people that might be going through a tough time at Christmas, whether it's from grief, from loss, or other situations. And Jim has a lot of experience talking through that. So we really appreciate him joining us today. And we hope that everyone can take away some life lessons and help make the holiday season more comfortable for everyone around us.
Yeah, I imagine this time of year, especially, Jim, like, I don't think there's a human being on the face of the earth that at this point in time isn't mourning some loss, whether it's a family, a friend, an animal, a pet, whether it's a relationship, whatever it might be. I mean, it's supposed to be some of the happiest time of the years, but a lot of times it's tempered with some loss. We do appreciate you being with us. Uh, Jim, could we start with introductions? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have been working at the Center for Grief Recovery and Therapeutic Services in Rogers Park for the last 2 years. I'm a licensed professional counselor there. And though our center does focus on people who have experienced the death of a loved one, be that spouse, partner, parent, sibling, friend, or child, we also have clients who come not having experienced a recent death, but dealing with a host of mental health issues. In addition to that part time work that I do in Rogers Park, I also, for the past 30 years, have been a part of the spiritual care team at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, formerly Children's Memorial Hospital, and have worked throughout the hospital there, primarily supporting, accompanying the parents, guardians, family members of patients, as well as patients, and supporting the staff. Presently, and for the past 2 years, I've worked in our cardiac care unit doing that work.
That is such important work. Thank you so much for doing that. Have a personal attachment to Lori's children. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode is because someone in my world lost their daughter in a very unfortunate situation due to illness. And, the whole family walked the path with them. And it was interesting going over your show notes. And when I asked you to do an outline for us, I talked to them. I talked to the people who were directly involved, and they were kind of shouting over how spot on some of your recommendations are. So I'm very excited to talk through just what are some practical ways that we can all be more compassionate and empathetic and understanding as we move through this season of joy. What are some of the things that you hear, some of the feelings that you hear people express during the lead up to the holidays? Like what are some of the pain points or concerns that you hear most about?
I would say probably what's top of the list is the awareness that the holidays will not be what they were. Um, and perhaps ever again, at least thinking that in the moment. And that's especially true for parents whose children have died. And also the awareness that I am not the same person that I was. I am not anticipating the holidays in the same way that I was in the past. In addition to that, I think many people who are grieving feel this disenfranchisement or awkwardness in the thought, even just the thought of being in social settings again. And what am I going to say? What are people going to say to me? I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't want to have to either on the one hand, have people come up to me and sort of, oh, and or people coming up to me and not knowing what to say and being uncomfortable. And I don't want to put them in that position, and or feeling the feelings might be towards people that don't exactly know what to say. That there might be feelings of some, like, not like animosity even towards them for not knowing how to be supportive of us. Whereas other people are like feeling, again, I don't like putting someone in that awkward position. I think apart from that, there's the obvious feelings after a death of guilt and anger and sadness. So, and and then people saying, then feeling awkward in that they have to find some way of telling people, or how am I going to tell people that I don't want to come, or we don't want to come to this event, that it has nothing to do with them, it has to do with us. And just the struggle that many people who are grieving have to go through just to explain or come up with a speech, if you will, of what to say.
Yeah, the elevator speech when I talked to my family that went through the loss, we were talking over some of the suggestions, and the elevator speech was the thing that they most strongly grabbed onto and said this was the most important thing, one of the most important things that we learned, because it was a way of making sure that you limited the engagement. That
That's right.
you knew how to say something quickly and you didn't have someone then falling apart on them, expressing emotion, and suddenly the person who's actually going through the situation is then counseling the person who's meeting them.
Right.
So
You don't,
elevator speech was very important.
yes. And yeah, it can just nip so many things in the bud in terms of the struggle that people who are grieving go through. So to really sit down and think through, talk through with your immediate family, what is it? What is the message that we want people to hear from us that puts them at ease, puts us at ease? One of my clients recently was getting together with college grads who they've been classmate, post college for like 30 years. And he was debating whether or not to get together with them for this weekend, football weekend. And he showed up and he first thing he said is, I'm just here to have fun. And it just put everyone at ease and nobody brought up. They just kind of followed his lead. He said there were a couple awkward moments where a couple spouses came up to him and sort of did and tears in their eyes and gave him a hug kind of a thing. But apart from that, having some one liner or what have you really helped put everyone at ease.
Well, and we're in a situation where everyone communicates. We communicate via social media. We communicate,
Yes.
in different ways, and sometimes face to face can be challenging, and it's a matter of setting boundaries. And with this person in my life, their lives have changed dramatically, and a lot of the core situation happened around the holidays, so it's a very sensitive time. And I come from a large Irish family, a passel of people. There's 70 of us. And it can be hard. It's trying to be very respectful of them and their feelings. Again, just knowing, and there might be a lot of behind the scenes conversation that's happening amongst family members saying, "Hey, how is this person feeling? Where do we go? How do we communicate, or do we not? And we just want things to be as normal as possible." And that's kind of where we've ended up, is just saying, that family takes the charge in bringing up anything emotionally strong.
To that, in social settings, there cues that you can look for. For example, I have a dear friend who has gone through cancer, and when he discovered it, one of my best friends, he asked me to call his friends and say, "Look, this is what's happening. This is how it's happening. This is
Mm.
what's going to go on. This is how he's hoping you'll react to it," which was beautiful. Made life so much easier. When you're in social settings, you're at a Christmas party, things like that, and you know someone's in a particularly difficult time, the loss of a spouse, a loss of a job, finances, whatever it may be. What are some of the things that you can look for that might, we talk about extending grace, that will help you to extend grace?
I think the easiest and the best approach, if you're at all wondering and you know the person and you have some kind of a relationship with them, I think, approaching them and just saying, is would you like to talk at all about going on? Or that can be awkward, or sometimes even just to say that. But I think you want to empower them in the sense, it may be difficult for them to be in a social setting, but anything that you can do or say simply that lets them know you genuinely care about them, and you want them to know that if they want to talk about what they're going through, I'm here to listen to you. In your own words, simply. Then, or would you just like to talk about other things, kind of a thing? And most people in social settings, unless they're with, yeah, I would say most people really don't want the attention to be put on them unless they make it clear that they do. Most people, if they're grieving and they're showing up in social settings, they're more than likely doing that as a distraction for themselves. They're trying to, I mean, it takes a lot of courage to go into a social setting when you're grieving, obviously, depending on how far out from the death it is. But if one has chosen to go to that social setting, then they're more than likely doing it again. Okay, I need to just get out of the house, or I need to get out of my head, or I need to, or at least try to step out for a moment, even of the weight, the burden that I'm carrying. So let's talk about the weather, what's happening in your life, sports, or whatever they would normally be talking about. But that being said, you just want them, in your own words, simply to know that if you do want to talk about what you're going through, I am here to listen, but not if you are not ready, willing, and able to really listen. Don't say that, right? Some people
Sure.
might say, yeah, I'm here for you or whatever, but are you really able to listen in the fullest, in the best way? That is keeping your mouth shut mostly and letting them share what they have to share. And are you able to hold whatever the feelings that they might have? Or, for example, if it's a more intense feeling of intense sadness or intense anger or intense guilt, are you going to be able to listen in a way where you're not going to be quick to say, don't feel guilty, or, oh, you know, you don't need to be angry, or, you understand what I'm saying? And that kind of listening is not easy for many people.
Like,
Yeah, it
I
seems
think
like go ahead, Jimmy.
we're very programmed to give glib responses in social situations. We're very
Yeah.
programmed to not talk seriously and find myself, it's something that I've challenged myself. I have a lot of people in my world going through cancer. And, like our vernacular is to say, "How are you feeling today?" And that's just about the worst thing that you can say because chances are it's pretty crappy.
Mhm.
And it shows a lack of sensitivity. So I think maybe some guiding responses from you to show, like, what are some touch points? What are some words or phrases that we could say that, again, show compassion and show grace, show that we're actively listening, but not belittling their situation.
Yeah, I think
Do you think,
probably.
Jim?
Oh, go ahead.
No, no. Go ahead,
No,
please.
I was going to say, that I think a line that is really honest and authentic is, Steve, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you're feeling. Again, this is, if only say this if this is genuine and you can follow through with this. But Steve, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you're feeling. But if you would like to ever talk about what's going on, I am here for you. I'm here to listen to you and to be with you. I also think, I generally tell people that less is better. And I generally tell people, just telling someone, I'm so sorry. But I have also heard from people who, in their grief, have said they got tired of so many people coming up to them and saying, "I'm so sorry," and sort of
Mhm.
the tilting of the head, "I'm so sorry." And I think I think everybody is different. So I think perhaps saying, "I'm so sorry, and I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you're feeling. And if you ever would like to talk and need a listening ear, you can, I'm here for you." But again, you don't want to say that if you're not able to follow through on that.
Yeah, I wonder, to me, it seems grief, loss, pain, it's singular. Nobody experiences it the same way another person does. But
Mhm.
part of the problem we have is human beings, especially human beings with empathy, is that we want to draw association with the person that you're trying to support. And I've seen a number of times where you get into the conversation with someone and they start with, what, sincerely wanting to know what's going on in your life and, what's burdening you. But then slowly, or sometimes very quickly, it evolves into their own personal situation. And before you know it, they're talking more about themselves than they are listening to you. That's one of the things that is most concerning to me.
When you see it happen, or for yourself, like you're saying, if you are the one grieving, yeah. I mean,
No, if you're talking to someone who's grieving and suddenly you're trying to connect with them and you start talking about your own personal experience and
yes.
it
It
overshadows
focuses
their
away.
experiencing. Yeah.
Yeah, it focuses back on you
Yes.
instead of you
And
providing
so, I
support for
mean,
them.
Yeah, I think I feel like that's a really common path that a conversation can take, and it's
it is a
inadvertent.
common.
I mean, I've done it.
Yes. Yes. I think obviously when what happens is it's coming from my own discomfort and my own awkwardness and my own not knowing how to listen well, or and I would say for many that's the case. And so I think, which is why people who are grieving will generally tend to limit their contact with other people for a period of time and limit their going into social settings. Because, the more polite person who's grieving might very well just sort of stay silent as the other person starts going on and on and on about their own situation. The person that's less polite might get, just really well, even the polite person may be brewing inside, but not know how to say anything. And the person that is, if you will, less polite might just walk away, or might just say, "Stop. No, you don't know what I'm going through. This is not helpful." But we can't expect a person who's grieving to do that. I think what you're talking about, though, is kind of like societal grief education, in terms of helping people in society to understand, at least generally, what a grieving person goes through, and that we really need to follow their lead. And like you said, Steve, that each person's experience of grief is unique. And it's not helpful for me to have in my mind for example, the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, and be in my head thinking, okay, where are they in their grief stages? And and even to bring that into the conversation, as if, because as if everybody goes through it the same way. No, I need to ask them. I need to listen to them. I need to follow their lead as to what they need in the moment, what they want from me, what they need from me in the moment. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, perfectly,
Very much
actually.
so. Yeah.
Is it Do you think it's too bold or too straightforward as you approach someone that's going through that to simply say, "What do you need from me?" Is that putting too much burden on them?
I have heard from people who have felt that as a burden. I have heard from people um, who are grieving, who have said, people have come up to me and asked me what I need. I don't know what I need myself, from day to day, sometimes moment by moment, hour by hour. I don't think it's a in and of itself, I don't think it's a bad question. It's definitely not a mean question. It's again, going back to my previous comment, if I'm going to ask somebody for what they need, am I ready to provide what they need? Again, not knowing what it is that they need, and they not knowing oftentimes what it is that they need. So I don't, I think if you have a good relationship with the person, if you have a history with the person, if you have a trusting relationship with the person, I think that's a valuable question to ask them, and be ready that they may say, I don't know what I need. And it could also be helpful to have in mind some specific things, in quotes, that you might be able to provide for this person. I've been talking a lot about, listening authentically, without judgment, with compassion, with empathy, with patience, comfortable with silence. That's a huge thing that people need. Another need might be just taking a walk with someone. I've known a lot of people who are grieving, who have found walking to be very helpful, and walking alone or walking with someone accompanying them. Another, practical need could be, when someone is grieving, and again, grief, when you're grieving your loved one who died, regardless of who that is, that grief is a force, in a sense, like the wind that comes and goes as it wills throughout one's life, but clearly is more intense during the first couple of years. But practical needs like preparing a meal, bringing food to them, cutting their lawn, shoveling their snow, at least offering that. Now, they may find preparing meals, shoveling the snow, cutting the lawn to be a release for them. So you don't want to just, I mean, I've had people that have told me, oh, people came and brought food and we really appreciate that. And I've heard others say, it got to be too much or it got to be overwhelming. So if you are the person, one of the people in the person grieving's life who does have a history and has an alliance, has a trusting relationship with that person, you could be the person, or at least one of the people, who can say, Joe, Susan, there's people in the community, people who know you, you know them, who would like to want you to know that they are willing to, they want to be helpful in some way, but they also want to respect your space, your privacy, and how you're, grieving. You can let me know if there are, without any pressure whatsoever on you. I don't want you to be thinking about this, or spending a lot of time thinking about this, but you can let me know if there are any practical things that arise where maybe you need us to pick up the kids after school, or you need someone to take the kids to school, or you need someone to accompany the kids. Again, you could come up in your head with a long list of things, but I would say that would kind of be the approach I would take. And again, coming from what others have told me, but again, what's helpful for one person may not be helpful for another person.
It seems like that's where being an active listener, an actual active
Absolutely.
listener comes in handy. I know, one of the first things I was taught in corporate was anytime you're trying to build a relationship with a client, don't look to be responding to everything they say. Listen to what they're saying. And it would seem that that would be especially true when you're dealing with someone who you don't know how they're going to react. But so
I want to
flipping
say one
that.
other thing you made me think.
Oh, please. Yes,
I
please.
think what, yeah, going exactly what you're saying about the listening piece. I think one thing that's absolutely critical in listening is self awareness. sometimes people who are grieving can say things that might trigger something inside of me or might make me have a like a reaction, almost like a, oh, how could they say that, or how could they think that, or how could they feel that? Because it can be very strong and very intense. And whether that be, for example, blaming themselves, our natural tendency is to want to tell somebody who's blaming themselves for the death of their loved one, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. I'm not saying to never, for us, that it's never good to say that to someone, but I think we just need to be careful at any time there's like a quick, like a response in that, like we feel like we need to, just like what you were saying, we need to quickly respond to something. When you notice that, that's, I think, a good indication I need to quiet that. It's better to allow them a good deal of time and space, provide silence, and then really, again, this is an art. It's not an exact science, but sort of trusting and your deepest sense that has comes from a more settled place of something you might want to say, but not those ones that sort of are immediate, sort of that might be coming from, I need to fix this person. I need to make them better. I need to tell them not to think that way, not to feel that way. No, and it can be it's a pretty subtle thing most of the time.
It can come across as trite, it can come across
Yes,
as like,
absolutely.
if you answer too fast, it's, "Wait, they're downplaying it." And
Yes,
again, it's our society that's programmed us to avoid these conversations, and
that's
it's our
right.
quickness to exit. Like, shoot, this person's blaming themselves for the death of their child. Like, I got to get out of here. Like, it's our panic. And so how do you tamp that down? How do you understand that, grieving, like you said, is a process. It's very intricate, it's very complicated, it's like stepping on a billion Legos for a really long time. There's no easy way through the war, and it's a long process. So, I know one thing that Steve and I share a friend that lost his dad very suddenly years ago. And I remember it was, I think, the second day after his father died. And this person just said, "I don't wanna be alone." And
Mm,
I work from home, so did he. I was able to go just sit on his couch. I didn't say a
mm.
bloody word to him all day, It was just he just did not wanna be alone in his space and wanted to know that maybe there was another human there. And, that was the service that I could provide for him at that point. And I'm happy to do that, that I could be there and flex my schedule, but also, I mean, social settings are tough, so how are some ways as us as hosts or hostesses this time of year, how can we reach out to people and maybe say to them, if you feel comfortable showing up, or give them that opportunity to communicate and also say, like, warn me, do you not want anybody to talk about this? Because as a
Mhm.
host or hostess, I can communicate that, or are you comfortable showing up? Do you want to show up early? Do you want to show up late? How can, like, maybe you might have some ideas of how we can communicate and be empathetic and compassionate in those terms.
Well, I think actually all those things you just said are great. I can say though that again, everybody's different, but I think if you're hosting and first of all, I would not invite someone because you know that they're grieving the death of a loved one, because that is only going to contribute to their feeling of isolation or their experience of isolation, right? Which is a normal experience when you're grieving that for many people. And so I think if you've invited them in the past, call them up or however you communicate and invite them again and say if you choose not to come, I will completely understand. Also, if you are sort of on the fence, uh, let me know if it would be helpful for me to let most people. I don't want to speak for most people, but my experience is that a lot of people would not want a host like telling everybody this is how Jane wants you or doesn't want you to talk to them or approach them. Or I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people. Some people actually would appreciate that. So I think if you're the host, simply asking that question. If you'd like, I could let people know you just want them to act completely normally and talk about all the usual things we talk about together. And yes, that I would prefer that you not ask me about how I'm doing or that you not mention Joey's name or Bill's name, whereas other people would want that. So a host would say, if you are thinking about coming, we could make a toast to Bill if that would be meaningful for you, or you could make a toast to Bill. Um, you can, we'll follow your lead. But again, if you are thinking about coming and you don't want us to talk about either, you, if you would rather tell people when you get there, sort of the whole elevator speech thing, when there's a moment, or if you'd want me to make sort of your elevator speech to people ahead of time, happy to do that. I think that's probably the best approaches for those kinds of events.
Can we take a second and flip the script?
Hmm.
What if you're that person? You've lost a family member, you lost a loved one, you lost your job, whatever grief, loss, anguish you're going through. What advice, and I know everybody's individual, but what advice would you give to that person who wants to try to begin extending themselves back into the public arena, but is just anxiety ridden and doesn't know how to go about doing it?
So the grieving person, how,
Mhm.
Yes.
yes. Well, you used the word grace before. I think tremendous I should say, trying each day, one day at a time, sometimes one moment, 1 hour at a time, trying to show a lot of grace, compassion, empathy, no judgment towards yourself for any and all and every feeling and thought that arises within you, knowing that it's all because someone that, in the case of a death, it's all because of the death of your loved one and the relationship that you had, however positive or complicated that relationship. So all of that is because of that. All that's been arising within you, feeling, thought, etc., is because of that. So tremendous trying each day to show yourself tremendous grace, empathy, compassion, etc., is so important. And that grace is like if you don't feel like going to work today and you're not going to, you're not going to be fired, and your management has given you that grace, you don't need to go to work. If you don't want to go to that Thanksgiving gathering, that Hanukkah gathering, that Christmas gathering, to that church or temple service, you don't have to go. However, some people feel within themselves that they actually have to go. Again, they're in this new skin, and it just, for some, changing the way they were can, I don't want to say can be as difficult as living with the grief, but it can be quite difficult to actually choose to do something different. So giving oneself permission to not do something, or to do something you did in the past differently, I think is a really important, I would say, learning or evolution or growth for people, or
Mhm.
growth in terms of their awareness. And so And again, that can be a very hard process. It can help to have somebody in one's life who can even suggest that to them in a low pressure, in a no pressure kind of a way. Might you maybe not go this year or do your own something yourself or yourselves if it's a part of a family, the person's a part of a family, at home. And it's okay to not be celebratory. I mean, it's not okay in the sense of I'm the grieving person. I'm not feeling okay with not being
Yeah.
celebratory, but at the same time, telling myself it's okay that this year I'm not feeling celebratory. And, there's cultures, traditions, religious traditions that acknowledge that loss, that death, that grief is a part of life and name it in sort of different religious holidays of the year. For example, in Judaism, in several of the major holidays, there's an acknowledgement, a naming of the loss that we, the community, have experienced. And so there's an honoring of the sharing of memories, and that's an important part of who we are as a community, as a family, is we remember and we celebrate and we remember. And there's joy and there's sorrow. And it's all a part of who we are as human beings. It's all a part of who we are as a human community, family.
So I think that
Right.
leads us into one thing that I really liked when you and I were talking about this episode is rituals. Creating rituals, as whether it's you're close to the event or as you move farther out has been my typical experience that those rituals become very important to certain people. And I know they have to, like me, for certain things that I do to commemorate people that I've lost in my life. And, Christmas is about joy, but it's also a contemplative time. You have a time of Advent. You have, this time of really being introspective and looking at where we are. So what are some rituals? How do you suggest people create rituals in order to weave this loss into a more positive fabric of our lives?
Yeah, I think like there's many simple things that people do. Probably the most universal um, ritual that people do in their homes. Some people on a daily basis. Some people at specific celebrations of the year is having a special candle that they light, and in the lighting of the candle, naming the person. I would say even the most simple, basic ritual is the naming of the person, um, and naming that person in any and all contexts for other people. I think some people will have a f- I've heard many people talk about how on the birthday, on the death anniversary, on the different celebrations, having the favorite food of that person, sharing that food amongst each other, having the favorite drink of that person, sharing it amongst themselves. Another ritual of telling, even if it's every time the special, the funny stories about that person, setting aside time, acknowledging, letting people, encouraging the sharing of those stories, inviting sharing of other stories that of the person who died. Obviously, a lot of people whose loved one is buried in a cemetery, be that their body, be that their ashes, or wherever, if it's ashes, they may have placed them. It's going to that place, and again, sharing stories, sharing memories. Some people will have a favorite, again, the favorite food or drink at that spot. Those are probably some of the most common ones. Others would be like singing and or playing the song or the songs that they connect specifically with that person, looking at a series of photo montage, whether that be in a photo album or on some photo on the phone, on the big screen, on the
Mm.
computer, looking at the photos of the person, creating that kind of a photo album to look at, to bring up every time we are intentional about remembering that person. Those are probably some of the more common ways. I've also known of people that have done things that are more uniquely, I think, personal, where they create like a little fire of sorts and burn something. Maybe it might be incense, or it might be when they're maybe at a place where they are needing to go, they're maybe going through things that they no longer want to hold on to. People have talked to me about, and again, this is unique to some people, where they burn that and sort of see the smoke going up as a, for them personally, as a releasing, as a lifting, as a letting go of the person, or what maybe, especially if there was any unreconciled aspects to the relationship with the person who died, where they might be needing to ritualistically release that anger, perhaps, or something that they felt they needed to either forgive that person of, or that they feel like they maybe didn't resolve with that person themselves, and they're looking for a way to, it's not magical, it doesn't necessarily automatically completely free one of that burden, but some people have spoken to me of how that has to some degree helped. And maybe not just once, maybe they do need to do it, multiple times over a long period of time.
Now, as we wind down, what are some resources for people that may not have hit a point of saying, I need help? And maybe the holidays are the tipping point. Maybe it's a point where they do have to, they like, tell us about your center and tell us some other places that people can reach out and potentially, help themselves.
Yeah, obviously, being a counselor, value meeting with a professional therapist, counselor, psychologist. It's not for everybody, but it's somebody who is trained to be able to listen to very attentively, and to be able to hold and respond in helpful ways to the weight of the grief that you are carrying. So individual counseling, therapy, what have you. Uh, some people find getting together, like being a part of a grief support group or a therapeutic grief support group. There are various ones offered in and outside of the city of Chicago, and pretty much for that matter, all around the country. And some people don't know whether or not a grief group will be helpful for them until they're actually in it. And so you kind of just need to try it out. Same with individual counseling. I would give it at least a couple of sessions, individual grief or group, and see how that feels. Of course, if you or someone feels like you might are like feeling really, really so fragile that you are concerned you might want to hurt yourself or someone, I would most definitely call the suicide hotline, which is 24/7 available. Somebody, again, to listen to you. And of course, if it's even more emergent, calling 911. I would say those are, reaching out f- first and foremost to someone in your life that has been there for you in the past. Number one. If you don't have someone, then reaching out to a center such as the Center for Grief Recovery, and there's many, 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 many counseling centers around the country, around the city, everywhere. Those would be my suggestions.
Perfect.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Jim,
Uh,
go ahead,
Go ahead.
Steve.
No, I was just gonna say, I remember my dad who passed years ago. once said that the most important thing a person can do for another human being is to show up.
Yeah.
And, it can be a simple, you know, touching base, comment, things like that. And, you know, that's something that I try to hold dear when I know, my friends or family are suffering. But all I know how to say right now is thank you so very, very much.
Uh,
It's been a lot of great information, deeply appreciated.
Thank you for sharing your time. And, thank you for the work that you do as a chaplain at Lurie's. Like I said, it's very near and dear to my heart. It's a place that we lost somebody that we love and spent a lot of time. And, I know for my family member who was there intimately, you guys played a huge role, the staff, and it takes a lot to show up in those situations, and consistently show up. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us. It's a tough season for some people. I mean, I'm in an
Absolutely.
era where a lot of my friends are losing their parents. I feel like every day I'm hearing about somebody else. And these are life lessons that, we need to be reminded of. And it's very simplistic, but just as Steve said, like I love what your dad said, Steve, just show up. Just be there. Hand out, ears out, just be present. All
Yes.
right. Well, thank you, Jim, for your time. We appreciate
You are
it.
very welcome.
And just talking
So,
about next episode that we have coming up is going to be actually Christmas Eve. And we're going to talk about the star of the show, Santa, the lore, the origin, where he came from, how he became what he is in our current American culture.
all righty. So on that note, again, thank you very much. Wish you the best of the holiday season, and hope that you know that the work you do is deeply appreciated by the people that you help to provide support for. So thank you.
You're very
All
welcome.
right.
Thank you so much for reaching out.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks, Jim, so much. And
All right.
everybody, happy
Bye.
Christmas to everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jim. Good night.
Bye bye.